California, and I could not, the entire plane ride there, stop thinking about vaping. I wanted it. I hear both sides a lot, and I hear a lot of the older people say, well, I like flavors too. You know, like I'm 25, but you know, I don't want to just be hitting a menthol vape. I want something with some blueberry. And then, you know, I also have my sister who's 16 and she vapes. And she did it mostly because of the flavor. She started because of the flavor. And I get that too. You know, you can't be marketing to kids, but you have to be, you know, you can't be making it these really fruity names. I think it's more of the names than the actual flavors. They name it Fruity Pebbles. They name it things like kids cereal, like Cheerios and stuff like that. I think that's when you really start to get into a problem.
I decided to ask Ryder what physical effects his nicotine vape addiction has had on him.
I can't run as long. I get I don't get lightheaded, but I'll get kind of lightheaded after a bit, you know, of running. I'll notice that I just don't have the lungs that I did before. You know, I was able to run for a long period of time, and now it's just not like that at all.
Owning a vape shop in a college town like Denton cannot be an easy task. Whether that be trying to decipher if someone's old enough to buy a vape, or the fact that they are providing an addiction that'll last an entire lifetime.
I truly believe myself that nicotine is one of the more addictive chemicals that you can be addicted to. It's definitely a physical addiction. I would say it's just as addictive as caffeine, and people don't even realize that they're addicted to caffeine until they stop drinking caffeine and they got crazy migraines. It's, you know, it's not as physically addictive as something as heroin, but it's up there in those artificial sugar addictions, caffeine addictions. It's a physical addiction. It's not just a mental addiction. It's mental addiction. You can be addicted to anything mentally, but physically you are addicted to nicotine. Like, you need it. So it's a little different. Kind of sucks. It's definitely hyper addictive.
With a wide variety of colors and flavors, it's often enticing for young people to try vapes. Little do they know what they are inhaling is the number 5 most addictive chemical in the whole world.
I started smoking when I was 12, cigarettes, and that just transitioned into vaping to try to quit just smoking a pack a day. But yeah, when I was like 13, I was stealing, like, the first time I ever smoked, I was 12, and then I was consistently stealing my grandpa's cigarettes, and I knew, like, it had its clutches already that young, so, and it hasn't stopped, so obviously still addicted.
Just to get an idea of truly how addictive nicotine is, Dylan smoked his first cig at 12 years old and is still smoking nicotine at the age of 38. Once it has its grasp on you, there's no escape.
I would say the downside is the upside. The downside is that it's so convenient. And because it's so convenient, you are more addicted. You're doing, you're vaping in places you shouldn't be vaping. Like, you can't smoke a cigarette in a hospital, right? But you can get away with smoking a vape in a hospital. You can get away with smoking a vape anywhere. So vapes, the downside of vaping is how addictive they are. The upside is the convenience, and that is also the downside, because you can do it anywhere. You can get away with it. It's a lot easier to hide because it doesn't smell bad. It doesn't, you get caught at school, say a 15-year-old's vaping. They go into the bathroom, they're like, nah, I just spritz some perfume. Like, they don't stink, their fingers don't stink. So there's no evidence other than if you find the actual vape. So it's like a lot more sneaky, convenient, and that's what is the downside as well.
After speaking with Dylan, I got a whole new perspective on nicotine vapes He truly opened my eyes to the fact that vapes are almost too convenient.
My name is Joaquin Esparza, and I am a former vapor. I actually quit sometime last year, about 6-7 months ago. Probably about 2 years straight, and then the bad day happened. I literally almost killed me.
At first, Joaquin didn't realize the severity of his lung issues. It wasn't until he was waking up in the middle of the night coughing that he realized all this coughing would eventually land him in a coffin if he didn't stop.
When I couldn't walk for more than 30 seconds, give or take, that took that long. Like I had to, it was during COVID, so like everybody was at home, nobody was at school, so I had to get my mom to help me walk to the bathroom, and that was just embarrassing. I was scared to tell her at the time, but it wasn't until I got to the emergency room when my friend's dad called and told her like I've been like vaping this whole time. So because the doctors weren't able to figure out what was wrong with me. But it's because like I was scared. I didn't want my mom, my grandparents knowing that like I smoked.
Although Joaquin didn't want word getting out to his parents and grandparents that he had been smoking, if not for this dire information, the doctors may have never figured out what was going wrong with Joaquin, as they finally narrowed it down to a combination of vape smoke and alcohol that had deteriorated his body to a point of no return.
Honestly, it was because when I got back to it for a little bit after, like, you know, being in the emergency room, like 6-8 months after that happened, I started again, which wasn't a smart decision, and that lasted until like, you know, recently, like last fall semester. That's when I completely stopped, because that's when I would be going to bed, but it'll be hard for me to breathe. I'm like, oh man, it's the vapes. I have to stop.
I was shocked to find out that after months of being clean off of nicotine, Joaquin fell under the ways of the nefarious addiction, which goes to show just how addictive nicotine truly is.
Traditional smoking is that everybody knows that it has different known consequences, but for the vaping, it's suspected that it's going to be similar or even worse, because it's several chemicals, small particles, deeper deposition, so that can be more damaging.
Based upon experience from my youth, most people don't intend to try nicotine vapes, but instead give in to peer pressure of looking cool.
The next few years, some sort of epidemic of unknown lung diseases. Some of them may be clearly related to second-hand exposure or just first-hand users.
A common trend throughout all my interviews was just how easy it is to access a vape, even at such a young age.
Not quite expensive and it's legal, no? So you just get it. Very common. I'm surprised even in middle schoolers, early schoolers, even kids who are in the teams, in sports, college kids, almost everybody does it. It's hard not to find a group that doesn't. Some people may be affected, some people may not, but and many times we do risky things thinking that it won't happen to me, it may happen to the next one, but it can happen to me too. Just to tell them up front that it's not healthy, doesn't help, it costs. You can start from bad smelling, yellow teeth, the girls may not like it, so something more that, or the boys may not like it, no? Something that it may be more real than lung cancer or emphysema or breathing problems, because they don't feel it. No? That's a 10-15 years later consequences.
Oftentimes it's said, you see in McDonald's on about every street corner, or a Starbucks. See, but in Denton, it doesn't feel that way. To me, it's almost as if they replaced all the Starbucks and all the McDonald's with vape shops. You can't escape this epidemic. Everywhere you turn in the town of Denton, you're faced with a vape shop, which makes it so much harder for people who are struggling to quit to actually go through with it. You just cannot escape it. You're consumed, just like your lungs are with the smoke.
I don't think there's enough research out there quite yet to determine if vaping is better than cigarettes. In the years that I have worked and seen the vaping, I don't feel like it's better, but I think it's being pushed as being better than cigarette smoke. But it took us 50 years to figure out that cigarettes were not good for us either.
With a lack of research, the lines are often blurred when trying to narrow down if a vape truly is healthier than a cigarette.
I think a lot of doctors are pushing, if you can't quit smoking, why don't you try vaping? It's better for you. But like I said, there's not enough research out there to prove that it's technically better than smoking a cigarette. And then in young kids, it's like cigarettes back in the day. They used to promote them as, oh, if you're depressed, smoke a cigarette. If your stomach hurts, smoke a cigarette. Now it's, vape.
Oftentimes people use vapes as a short-term stress reliever. Little do they know that vape they're inhaling happens to actually cause more stress than it relieves.
Years ago when vaping was starting to, people who've been vaping for 10, 15 years were starting to come into the hospital, and we couldn't quite figure out what was going on with them. They were young, but they were having severe lung diseases, and some of the patients that we did bronch while vaping, we were seeing pus pockets inside their lungs, things that we hadn't seen, and it actually looked like their lungs were being burned from the inside out from vaping. But now that COVID has come, it's hard to actually identify if vaping or cigarette smoke or COVID has caused all this scarring in lungs. So I think it's slowed down the research process.
I asked Summer if she could give any advice to future generations who are considering vaping.
To just not smoke or vape, it's detrimental to you. Plus your brain is still growing, and vaping can actually damage your brain cells. So let your brain fully develop before you make decisions in using nicotine.
It's very common for people to try and shy away from their addictions. But when it comes to vapes, this could be a life-changing decision.
There are medications out there that help you kind of, like the nicotine patches and stuff that kind of help break, bring down your nicotine levels until a spot where you're not there anymore. I think that helps. And then you just gotta, a lot of people has it as a mental, oh, I need a cigarette, oh, I need a break to go smoke. Maybe focus on something else like working out or, something besides that cigarette or that vape.
Whether it be a cigarette or a vape, there is no way to escape these carcinogens being inhaled into people's lungs on a daily basis.
You just don't want them to do it just because they're so young and it's addictive, and it can lead to other addictive problems later on in their life. Just don't want to do it.
Finding a healthy addiction to replace vapes is a very good route, especially when most people don't even know what exactly they're inhaling.
I think the biggest fear is the fact that people don't know what they're consuming. Not so much that they know they're smoking nicotine, it's that they don't know the amount of nicotine they're smoking, and what actually that's doing to their body. Nicotine is obviously chemically addictive, and it's also not good for your heart whatsoever.
Hello there. I know you're used to seeing me behind the camera, but I figured I'd switch things up. I made this documentary to spread awareness on nicotine vapes and the damage that they're not only causing to your brains, but obviously your lungs. As much as I am against nicotine vapes, there was once a day that I was constantly buying, using, and abusing vapes. I actually remember the first day I bought my own vape. Walked into a vape shop. I asked the owner, "What flavor do you recommend?" To which he asked, "I don't know, what do you like? Do you like ice flavors? Or are you more of a fruity flavor guy? And I said, "Well, actually, this is my first time to ever buy a vape." To which he replied, "Then I'm not going to sell you one." Do you realize this is an addiction that's going to be with you for the rest of your life? And it's almost impossible to break. So he turned me away. Of course, being the young, dumb person I was, I went to the next closest vape shop and bought my first vape, which then essentially caused a domino effect that has lasted over 3 years now. As much as I want to say I've completely quit, if I'm being honest with myself, I haven't. Because if I get a few drinks in me and I see somebody hitting their vape, chances are I'm going to ask to hit it as well. People don't realize these vapes might seem innocent, but they are deteriorating your health. I mean, I can even feel the effects. People think they market these things as some sort of better alternative to cigarettes, but that's so far off. And I know I'm going to watch this documentary years from now, and I'm going to see what studies have found out about vapes, and I'm going to say, "Told you so," because these things are dangerous, and it needs to stop. But first, I have to fight my own battle before I can tell other people to fight theirs.